Right guys, welcome to the second of the two controlled communication videos. If you're watching this one first, it's not the end of the world if you're watching it first because they're quite unrelated. However, I will refer to things I've mentioned in the first video in this one. So if you are watching this one and you haven't seen the first video, I would stop this and go back and watch the first one. Remember how to use these, so you almost want to use them like a book. You can look up each of these different chapters. So if it is particularly reflex actions or control of blood glucose that you're here for, then you've come to the right place. So yeah, reflex actions are the next thing to talk about. Now just to explain what a reflex action actually is, there is certain things that your body will be able to respond to so quickly that you don't even involve the brain. You don't actually even decide about it. I think some of you, if not all of you, will have had a situation where you might have accidentally touched something hot, like you maybe walked past a pot, or you've not realised the iron's been on and it's turned off, or maybe a bulb has been left and then the lamp's gone out and you've went to touch it. And basically, if you hold something or try and touch something which is really, really hot, something quite strange actually happens. Your hand, and you maybe noticed this, you maybe haven't, but your hand will actually bolt away from the thing that's causing the pain before you decide to take it away. It's not as if you've touched the hot surface and then you go, oh that's sore, I better take my hand away. Even if it's a very quick decision, what actually happens is your hand bolts away and then you realise actually it was sore. Another example, that's an example of a reflex action. Another really good example of a reflex action is if you blink, and obviously everybody blinks, but if somebody was to maybe blow a wee bit of air in your eye, you would automatically blink. You don't do it deliberately, you don't choose to blink, but you will blink in response to that. Now, the fact that it happens without you knowing is very interesting, because a reflex action does not actually involve the brain, which is quite strange to think. So your body's doing something, literally doing it automatically. If the pain is bad enough or the danger is bad enough, your body will respond automatically to it, and it's to keep the body safe from further harm. That's the whole idea behind it. You're keeping the body safe from further harm by, you know, if you touch a really hot surface, your hand bolts away, you go, then you realise, oh that was hot, but it's not, you don't realise first and then decide to take it away because it doesn't involve the brain. That's probably the most important thing about a reflex reaction. It doesn't involve the brain. It's a much faster reaction. As well, and that makes sense because if you're trying to protect the body from harm, you don't want to be taking ages removing yourself from that danger. So reflex actions are really fast as well. They don't involve the brain, but what do they involve, right? So they do still involve sensory neurons and motor neurons. There's no change there. Sensory neurons are the thing that detect the pain, and then it's sent up across sensory neurons and then across synapses all the way up, and it gets as far as your spinal cord. That story is exactly the same as a normal reaction, but instead of the signal being sent up to the brain, it actually uses that, remember that third type of neuron that we mentioned up here? They're called interneurons, and interneurons are found inside the spinal cord, and what they do is they create a direct link from the sensory neuron straight back down to the motor neurons again. So they create this link that doesn't involve the brain. So you touch the hot thing, pain into spinal cord, and then move down the motor neurons. It's an interneuron that does that. Okay, so the basic story is we have, I can't remember the colours I used, so nice to have a colour scheme, but we have pain, sensory neurons carry the signal up to an interneuron, in spinal cord. And then the signal is sent directly down a motor neuron. And then obviously that means that you can react. So we have a reaction to the pain that does not involve any decision making by the brain. That's what a reflex action is. So it's a signal sent directly up sensory neurons, head into the spinal cord, but instead of then being sent up to the brain to be sort of like worked out, or what should we do, you save a tiny bit of a time, a quarter of a second or something, but you save a tiny amount of time because the interneuron just immediately sends a signal down to the motor neuron without involving having to go up to the brain, be processed and brought back down again. So that's what a reflex action is. And remember, they don't involve the brain, they're faster than an ordinary reaction, and here's another phrase that I gave you earlier on. They help keep the body safe from further harm. Now, I do get candidates, every year pupils will write, they protect the body from harm, and the truth is, they don't really protect you from harm. They'll protect you from further harm because they stop you getting any more burned than you already are, but they're not going to save you from actually getting burnt initially, because you touch the hot thing. It's going to minimise the amount of pain or the amount of damage that you cause yourself, but it won't completely keep you safe from harm. So be very careful if you're asked, what are reflex actions for? What's the use of them? They help keep the body safe from further harm. Do not say they keep the body safe from harm, because it's technically not true. Right, on to the last of the topics, and this one kind of sits apart from the others, because up until now, when we've talked about signals being sent around the body, we have simply talked about the nervous system. Now, the control of blood glucose involves signals being sent around the body as well, but it does not involve the nervous system. Does it involve signals being sent from the brain to certain glands or anything else like that? What it does is it involves hormones. Now, before we actually start talking about the control of blood glucose specifically, I want to make some general statements to you about hormones, right? Hormones, as you may remember from the proteins topic that we did before before school shut, before Christmas, we talked about hormones and what they are. First of all, the majority of them are proteins. I'll just cast your memory over to this diagram. Remember that diagram that you made? It was your class. You'll see in the top left of that diagram, hormones are an important protein. Back to an extreme close-up of me, sorry about that. Hormones are proteins. Majority of them are proteins. There are other types of hormones that aren't, but don't you worry until you get into advanced higher about too much about different kinds of hormones. They are carried in the blood. Carried in the blood. And they are released from endocrine glands. Talk about what these words mean in a minute when I've written it all down. And they act on specific target cells. So hormones don't just go around the body and just have the same effect on every cell. They actually only act on some cells and not other cells, and it's because some of the because target cells for certain hormones have specific receptors. Or receptor proteins is a better way of putting it. And again, you might remember, but that's another type of protein you can get is receptors. So I'll move over to this side actually. It's doing so well. That's the stage for that. Right, so hormones or proteins are carried in the blood. they're released from endocrine glands. We've got endocrine glands all over your body. Their job is just to release hormones into the bloodstream, and then whatever signal that hormone is trying to pass on can then be carried around the bloodstream. And of course the bloodstream takes things all over your body. Your entire body's got bloodstream access, so wherever the hormone's supposed to be acting, it can do that using the bloodstream. So that's an excellent way to get about. Of course, oxygen and carbon dioxide and glucose and other things like that are carried around in the blood, but hormones also are as well. These endocrine glands release them into the blood. They move about until they get to a target cell. Now the hormone itself doesn't know what its target cell is. It's just kind of just a protein floating about in the blood, and it's not looking about and saying, oh, that's my target cell over there. It'll be colliding with cells all the time. But it won't do anything unless the cell has got a hormone, a specific receptor protein for that particular hormone. Okay, so you'll find that you put cells, let's say that diagrammatically our hormones are triangles, right? There's loads of triangle hormone molecules floating about in the blood. And here's the membrane of a number of different cells in the body. So there's one with nice square receptors. Here's another cell with nice circular receptors. These receptors are proteins as well. And here's a cell here with lovely triangular receptors. And what would happen is this particular hormone, whatever this hormone might be, moving through the bloodstream, it's bumping into these receptors, but it's not particularly doing anything. It's the same when it gets to these circular ones. It doesn't fit, so it's not going to. But when it bumps into these receptors, it will actually have a place it can bind onto, right? And then that will cause a reaction inside that cell. So only target cells with the specific receptor proteins, try and remember that phrase, specific receptor proteins, only those cells will have the means to react to these hormones. So that's how hormones work. So it's a general overview of hormones. Again, you might want to pause and just make sure you've got your head around those little fact file on hormones before I rub it off. But we're going to very specifically deal with one particular hormone or two particular hormones that interact with each other to help control blood glucose, right? Now, we've already covered respiration. We understand that to keep a cell alive, we need a good supply of glucose. It's essential that the body keeps a supply of glucose high, which is why we have to eat to survive, right? You stop eating, you will die. I think that's pretty straightforward, but the real reason why you will die if you don't eat is because you're not providing the cells with anything that they can extract energy from through the process of respiration. And the most readily available energy is glucose, right? So glucose level being controlled is dead important, right? Anybody that knows anybody that's got diabetes and people who can't control their blood glucose level will understand how dangerous it can be. It can cause you to pass out, or it can even cause death actually if you can't control your blood glucose level. So important that we can do it, right? So in the bloodstream, if we take a large meal into our body, our blood glucose level is going to go up, right? Because your body has broken that meal down. Glucose and other things are getting absorbed out your small intestine and taken into the bloodstream. So your blood glucose level goes up, which in a sense sounds like a good thing because glucose is good for you, but you can't have glucose staying high in the blood. Glucose staying high in the blood for too long can cause things like type 2 diabetes, can cause knock-on effects, can cause obesity, can cause blood clots, and all sorts of terrible things can happen if your blood glucose level is not controlled. So if you take a large meal straight after a big lunch, or you've gone to had a big dinner or whatever, your blood glucose level has gone up, right up. Okay, your body has to bring that back down again, and it does that using a hormone called insulin. Okay, what happens is the pancreas, which is one of the organs in your it's part of your digestive system in a sense, it's sort of in the centre of your body here, and it's constantly detecting changes, right? So sometimes your blood glucose level's too high, Other times, like so when you first wake up in the morning, your blood glucose level can be too low because you haven't had anything to eat in a few hours and your blood glucose level is actually starting to go too low. That's equally as dangerous, right? You can't get away with having a blood glucose level which is too low either. So we have a second hormone. So when that's detected again by the pancreas, we have a second hormone that brings your blood glucose level back up again, and I'll show you how we do that with what is quite a simple diagram. Now remember, there are notes that go along with this, but ultimately there's nothing that that you need to know that I'm not already saying in this video, okay? So you watch it enough times and take in what's being said, use it along with your notes, and then I will post a homework up about this topic as well. So anyway, so how do these two hormones, insulin and glucagon, how do they help to control blood glucose level? So I want you to imagine we have blood glucose, and for that I'm just going to draw glucose as lots of wee squares. So all these little individual glucose molecules floating about in the blood, and minding their own business, but at the end of the day, if there's a lot of it, which I'm attempting to show diagrammatically, there is a lot of glucose in the blood, we need to do something with it. Now glucose is useful, right? Glucose is of use to the body, so it's not like rubbish, you don't want to throw it away. But if you've got too much of something which is useful, this is where I would ask a question, but unfortunately I'm in an empty classroom. If you've got something that's useful, what would you want to do with it? If you get too much of something but it's useful, you want to store it, right? And that's exactly what insulin tells the body to do. So we have lots of blood glucose floating about, we've got a high level of blood glucose. Insulin is released by the pancreas. Insulin, and what insulin will do is it will tell the liver, so there's another bit to think about, the target organs. If you remember what I mentioned about target organs, if you don't know what I mean when I say target cells or target organs, you need to rewind this video and go back. But the target cells for insulin are found in the liver. So if I draw a quick sort of sketch of the liver, as long as the pancreas has released insulin, what it will do is it will take blood glucose and it stores it up inside the liver. So you've got this big, almost like brick wall made out of glucose molecules, all stored up inside the liver. Now that substance where you take all the glucose and stick them together is called glycogen. Glycogen in the liver. Okay? So the pancreas releases insulin. If there's too much glucose, the pancreas releases insulin and glucose from the blood gets stored up as glycogen in the liver. Fairly straightforward, right? But that's only half of your life. The other half of your life, your blood glucose level is too low, and your body's got to do something about that as well. So the pancreas, again, the pancreas detects these changes, decides, alright, okay, the blood glucose level is too low, so what we're going to do, right, we could make the body feel hungry and go and eat, but that's not always a solution. And obviously we're talking about within minutes here, we're not necessarily talking about that you've got an hour, you need to go and get some more glucose. That's not the way this is working. We're talking about instantaneous changes above and below, up, down, it's happening all the time. Right now you're sitting watching this video, your blood glucose level is either slightly too high or slightly too low, and your body's correcting it. So remember what insulin told the liver to do with all this spare glucose? It stored it up. Now why do you store something up that's useful? Because one day you're going to use it again, right? And that's exactly what happens. The pancreas releases glucagon, and glucagon tells the liver to start releasing some of these glucose molecules. So one of them breaks off and gets released into the bloodstream. Another one breaks off, gets released into the bloodstream. Now if that happens enough, the blood glucose level is going to go back up. So insulin is designed to bring your blood glucose level back down when it's too high, and glucagon is designed to bring your blood glucose back up when it's gone too low. And so at all times your body is either going to be releasing one or the other. So make sure that you understand insulin is the hormone that's released in response to blood glucose being too high, and it tells the liver to store glucose as glycogen. Glucagon is released when glucose is gone. I always think that's a good way to remember it. Glucagon is released when blood glucose is too low, and it tells the liver to release some of that stored up glycogen as glucose to bring your blood glucose level back up. Okay, so there are several different things at play, and it's not that easy to think about, right? The pancreas is the main organ in this whole story, because the pancreas is detecting the changes, and the pancreas is releasing the two different hormones depending on what situation the body's in, right? So the pancreas is a very, very important organ in this whole process. Incidentally, I get that as an answer quite a lot. When somebody tries to answer the pancreas, they write pancreas. Now pancreas, there's no such thing, but the problem is it doesn't say pancreas when you do that, so please ensure if you're writing an answer to a question and the answer is pancreas, don't write an E at the end. Pancreas does not have an E at the end, right? I know that kind of looks weird without an E. I understand why people put an E, but do not do it, okay? Very, very common mistake. So anyway, yeah, so the main thing, the main organ, if you like, in this control of blood glucose is the pancreas, because that detects the changes and it releases the two hormones depending on what one needs to be released. But we also need to understand the role of the liver in this situation. The liver is the target organ for insulin and glucagon, right? So if you were to look at a liver cell, if you were to take a big version of it, zoom right in the liver cell, you would find there were receptors for glucagon and receptors for insulin all over it. And that's why insulin and glucagon work on the liver. Insulin and glucagon would not work if they acted on, like the stomach or the small intestine or something. They would not be target organs or target cells for those hormones. Right, that is the extent of everything I need you to know about controlled communication. Bear in mind this is 22 minutes, so you get a good kind of nearly 40 minutes of high quality biology teaching there, but please make sure you take your time to go through it all. You might want to just think about it in terms of structures. This would be a series of lessons which might take not a couple of weeks, but about a week or so, whereas I'm cramming it all in to videos. I know and recognise I'm going through it faster than would be comfortable, but that's the beauty of the video, so please do remember that. As I said, I will post up, I'm going to actually speak to you very soon because I'm coming on a live lesson with you where I'll discuss some of these ideas, and I will post a homework exercise up for this as well at some point shortly. So thanks for your attention, assuming you're still watching. And please, as I said, use these videos the way they're intended. I'm not expecting you going to sit for 40 minutes, listen to me talk, and then expect to know, oh, it's just not going to work that way. So please use them properly. They're going to require a number of views, a number of shorter views, and watch them in sections. Okay, right, thanks guys.